We stood it up to pilot within 6 days in our first psychotherapy group, scaled it across the health system over the course of just a few short weeks. And then we were also a model within the state and nationally for telehealth services for group-based ambulatory psychiatry and behavioral health. And that's when I thought, okay, wait, technology is giving something that needs to be gave. There's some opportunities here that we're not really thinking about. And that really unlocked for me, what if there's a whole world that I haven't even considered that's going to help me optimize how treatment is delivered?
Hello, and welcome to Season 2 of Beyond the Couch, AI in Psychology. I'm your host, Dr. Ernest Wayde. Now, as always, before we get started, I want to thank the organizations that make this podcast possible. This episode is sponsored by the American Board of Professional Psychology, the National Register of Health Service Psychologists, and my consulting firm, Wayde AI. Their support helps us create thoughtful, psychology-focused conversations about how AI is shaping our field. Okay, I'm really very excited to introduce you to our guest today, Dr. Amber Childs. Dr. Childs is a leader in child and adolescent mental health. She's also the founder and CEO of the Dr. Childs of the Dr. Amber Childs Advisory and an associate professor of psychiatry at Yale School of Medicine. She's a nationally recognized expert, award-winning innovator, and media contributor with works featured in the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNBC, and more. She's authored over 50 peer-reviewed manuscripts and presentations with a focus on improving mental health outcomes for youth across clinical care, innovation, and public engagement. Amber, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Anytime I hear my bio, I think I might be somebody. I might be somebody. So thank you. Thank you for reading that and for reminding me of that. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for the work that you're doing on this show, on this podcast. I myself have found it so incredibly engaging and interesting to hear from so many of my
Good.
peers and colleagues.
I'm so glad, and we are glad to have you on the show. But before we get started, I always like to start by asking, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your work, and the journey that led you to AI, including some of those experiences that really shaped your perspective?
Yeah, I always tell people, I always start with this, and if people have heard this, you just have to know I keep it a buck all the time, and this is what's true. I'm a Black girl from Georgia, and I grew up in a military family, a family of people who, for several generations, were in the enlisted services. And though I myself was not in the military, I always bring that up to people because service is a core value that I have.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I think about being a psychologist is that it is the opportunity to be of service to help people access the wisdom that I think is inherent and inside of all of us so that people can live their fullest, freest, and most authentic lives. And functionally, what that has meant for me in my work at Yale and elsewhere has really been being thoughtful about what are the data driven practices that I can use? What are the innovative practices that I can use to make sure that everybody who wants to, right?
Mhm.
And everybody who deserves to has access to those things that help them tap into that resilience, that well-being, and to get through adversity. So I have spent, like, how did I get to AI? By accident. Going, like, literally by accident. I was in this room right here in 2020 when COVID hit. And I remember saying to the vice chief of psychiatry at the time, I know how to use Zoom. And he was like, what? I was like, I think I can come up with a solution for us to have our team. So at the time, I was leading the intensive outpatient services, the adolescent intensive outpatient services, ambulatory psychiatry and behavioral health at Yale New Haven. They have 5 different delivery networks, 13 different IOPs across the state of Connecticut, mostly on the southeastern side. And we were like, oh, we need to provide like a 5-day a week, 3-hour a day care to people like overnight. I
Mhm.
said, I know how to use Zoom. I think I can come up with a solution. I spent 6 days in this room, found out we had bats in our attic for how late I stayed in here, but I was determined to be like, there is a way that technology is going to help me get back into the lives of these teenagers who are
Mhm.
waiting for us right now. We stood it up to pilot within 6 days in our first psychotherapy group, scaled it across the health system over the course of just a few short weeks. And then we were also a model within the state and nationally for telehealth services for group based ambulatory psychiatry and behavioral health. And that's when I thought, okay, wait, Technology is giving something that needs to be gave. There's some opportunities here that we're not really thinking about, and that really unlocked for me, what if there's a whole world that I haven't
Hmm.
even considered
Yeah.
that's gonna help me optimize how treatment is delivered, what the experience is like, even beyond telehealth. And so as I started to experiment with technology and implementing things like measurement-based care, how we could streamline and systematize things and scale things, that is where the conversation around AI started to enter in. And really, I think it was sort of adjacent with another player in the game, which is huge for me as a child and adolescent person, which was social media. And so, as I started to think about youth digital engagement, AI just sort of naturally intersected with care delivery, but also just the ways in which people are engaging in the world in relationships. So that
Yeah.
was a long roundabout answer, but that's how she got
No,
here.
I love that story, right? And it's because you're talking about how you can use AI as a tool to enhance the work that you do and the care that you provide. And now we're also finding that teens are also using AI for various reasons, including right trying to help themselves. So when you look at teens right now, how is AI actually showing up in their day-to-day lives?
How is AI not showing up? I think is actually the question, right? I mean, truly, right? It's such a good question. And actually, some colleagues at the JED Foundation, well, look, I'm saying these are colleagues. No, we go deep. Some colleagues at JED Foundation, Circle Health, and Young Futures just put out this combined report a couple weeks ago that was actually talking about the ways in which teens are using AI. So, first of all, I do a lot of conversation with grown people, grown folks about like, let me tell you what's going on with teens right now. You need to know teens are using AI. Horse is out of the barn. That's off top. You just have to know they're using it. But now the question is, how are they using it?
Hmm.
And there is a segment of teens, like 32% or so, that are like, I've got like an arm's distance relationship with AI. I feel like I'm vibing with it. I've got a healthy sort of appreciation of what its limitations are. And I'm using it for things like answering questions, summarizing data, helping to assist me with different kinds of questions and to optimize, if you will, my day to day experience. But then there's also a segment of teens that are like, I am actually pretty skeptical
Hmm.
about AI, and I actually have some anxiety about the direction that AI is taking people. And I remember there was a teen, a young person who was a scholar, researcher. She presented her work at a conference that I was at last November, and she was expressing her concerns that, um, the future of teen connection in relationships was starting to become stilted or even foreclosed because a lot of teens were not going through the paces of like trying to sort through that messy middle of what it means to be in relationship with one another. So there are teens that are skeptics, but there are also teens that are like super users that are like, I feel really excited about the future of AI. I'm really interested in the way that it's going to change the way that people work, the way that people think, the way that people learn. Smaller percentage there. And then there's, of course, a percentage of people where AI is showing up for them in ways where they are utilizing it or leveraging it on behalf of their mental health. And so that oftentimes is the area of conversation where we tend to focus.
Yeah. So you mentioned, parents, the caregivers. So what are you hearing from parents, right? About those parents who are trying to make sense of how AI is should we say getting more and more involved in their daily lives, and then they're trying to manage everything, including how to raise adolescents, how to manage their AI use, social media. What are you hearing from caregivers around all these tensions?
And during a time when the teenager is individuating, they are trying to become that own individual self. And so may or may not be as open to conversation or perspective. Here's what I'm hearing from parents: we are afraid
Hmm.
and we are not sure what to do. Like those thematically are some of the overarching concerns. And I think it's really anchored in a lot of what we've been seeing in our news cycles, frankly, and for some good reason, right? There are absolutely headlines that have been incredibly and deeply concerning around some of the problematic outcomes for teens engaging with AI chatbots. But I find that I have a conversation that feels quite adjacent to the social media conversation, which is I want to know what to do and I want to know what I can do now to help support my teen. And I'm not sure where to start because look, I don't know about all the TikToks and Buy Rocks and Roblox and Instagrams and Facebooks and all these different things. I cannot possibly keep up. So please tell me what I can do. And so I really try to focus on what kinds of information is evergreen for parents and that is going to be broadly applicable from social media to AI and more.
Mhm.
And the thing that I oftentimes say is, here's the thing: a chatbot can talk to your teenager, but they will never be able to tuck your kid in bed at night. They will never be able to put their arms around your child and reassure them in, a really distressing or upsetting moment. So there are things and tools that we have as caregivers that are readily at our disposal that never ever go away. So I talk a lot about communication. I talk a lot about connection.
Mhm.
I also say to parents, we should 100% be taking to the streets to make sure that technology companies are held responsible for putting into place safeguards and regulations that are going to protect our children, that are going to protect our youth who are curious, who are exploring into this technology, and who will quite frankly have to contend with it in some regard
Mhm.
as they move about and into their adult lives. So I could talk about more of the, kind of specific strategies that I give to parents, but the concerns are, like, I don't want my child to be unsafe. I don't want harm to come to my child. And I'm afraid because there's such this great wide unknown and
Mhm.
things are rapidly accelerating and they're changing every single day, which is actually true.
Yeah, I find that really interesting because as a parent, I know that kids can also seem like they're not listening to me when I tell them very sound advice, right, from my experience and all these things. But I know that they're also getting something out of using AI. So what are you hearing from the teens? What are they getting out of using AI?
I think that teens are really interested in non judgmental access to information quickly. And as teens are exploring like those more tender, sensitive curiosities, they're trying to understand and learn more about themselves, particularly in the sort of interpersonal relatedness space.
Mhm.
Those are questions that they're asking AI because they don't necessarily feel comfortable or confident to try that out with a person first. So
Yeah.
it's not that they're not going to go to a person, but it's that they want to do some trial runs, some test drives, if you will, right? To think out loud with more than just themselves. So that would be the first thing that I find. And then the other thing that I hear a lot, and I get a lot of beef about this, a lot of flack about this because I'm like a millennial, is like they're using it for search. They're also using it just for straight up search and summarization,
Yeah.
is what I oftentimes hear, right? From teens about how they're using it. Um, but in that study that I talked about, those data that we're talking about, the percentage of teens who were using AI for mental health concerns,
Mhm.
they were reaching out in the absence of offline support with a trusted adult or with a trusted peer group or with a parent. So it was really in those cases where they didn't have anyone else to go to at any point, where
Mhm.
they were venturing into conversations that would be perhaps more concerning to you or I or other psychologists or caregivers, and be moving beyond just sort of that initial exploratory space.
Yeah, I really appreciate that information, knowing that they're reaching out to AI when they don't feel they have other resources. How do we support that as parents? Because you don't want to, if it's something that's helpful to them, you don't want to take it away. But then how do we also help them understand the boundaries of these things? Because AI can be very helpful, but there's also a lot of risk associated with it. So how do
Yeah.
we as parents manage that and help them manage that themselves?
You know what? I saw this TikTok and I'm going to tell you about it because it was so good. But there was this physician, scientist, triple board certified, and all the certifications you can get, right? Including child and adolescent psychiatry. And he was talking to parents about, like, how do you deal with when your child has or your teenager has a friend that you're like, I'm not quite vibing with that friend, right? Not quite vibing with it. And he goes, the first thing you got to do is do not attack the friend.
Hmm.
Because the minute that you attack the friend, it does a couple things. Number one, it activates the amygdala and it activates that sympathetic nervous system. Now they're in fight or flight. And now they don't have access to that prefrontal cortex where they're going to
Yeah.
be able to make decision making. Then the dopamine pathway that's looking for high value, high reward is also rocking and rolling. So what's going to happen is they're not able to really make decisions and
Hmm.
really engage in that critical thinking. And they're going to be more likely to defend the friend
Yeah.
and feel defensive, right? And so, not that AI is a friend, but that strategy still applies when we're thinking about the brain structures and the developmental pathways, right? So, it is an opportunity for us to approach it instead with a framework of curiosity, right? What are the things that you're using AI for? How are you feeling after you use it? What was your experience like? Are there things that you're noticing yourself feeling concerned about? You would use whatever language you would use as a parent, right? You would put this
Yeah.
into your own terms. But really, instead of warning the teen or really coming down hard on like, this is nothing to play with. You got to take this super seriously out the gate. It's
Mhm.
keeping the door open with a framework of curiosity. Then it's collaborating with the teen to think about, based on the context of your experiences, what now are some of the boundaries that we need to craft together to enable you to continue to explore, but do it in ways that are safe and that you have a continual check in process with me if anything comes up that is having you feel any sort of way. And knowing what the response is going to be from the caregiver when inevitably they do encounter content that makes them feel uncomfortable. By the way,
Yeah.
you can copy and paste this for social media too.
So, I mean, I know sometimes this has never happened to me, right? But sometimes you get into that black and white thinking, right? It's either is or it isn't. So, what are some of those extremes sound like in a real conversation when you talk with an adolescent? And I'm asking for a friend, not for me. So,
Yeah, 100%. Extremes would be something like a teenager telling you about sexually explicit content that they felt
well,
extremely uncomfortable by. Were really having like, I just couldn't stop thinking about it because this is what I saw. A lot of times teens are not going to say, I saw some really uncomfortable sexually explicit content, but they might describe to you some features of the content, or your child, right? So you can see like, what is their body language, what's their tone of voice, is this information that they're feeling like, you know, I'm feeling much more protective about this. That might be your signal to say, okay, let's get a little bit more curious about what's going on.
mhm,
Obviously, any kind of content that demonstrates or discusses like illegal kinds of behaviors would certainly be important. And then I think the thing that's on most of our minds is really the conversation around safety and suicide risk. So
mhm,
to the extent that there's content that the teen is encountering in an AI scenario or even in any digital media scenario, where there are concerns about risk or crisis
yeah.
or immediate safety. Those are the kinds of things where you do introduce a little bit more, I think, of a boundaried stance around,
Mhm,
this is where I really want you to come to me because there's other resources that we have, and
mhm.
that's just going to be so much more effective for us than using AI.
Okay, yeah, that definitely makes sense with those extreme boundaries where safety and security are really important. What about the middle of the road where it's more poor judgment? Like AI is telling them something that is just poor judgment, but they don't listen to me because what do I know? I'm just a parent, right? They trust AI because also AI is very affirming to them. How do you manage
Yeah.
that?
You know what I love? I love like a joint experiment. You know what? You might be right. Let's look at this together. Can we ask it? Because I might be tripping right now. Let's just ask it the thing and see what it said. Let's look at
I
that
love this.
chat
Let's bring
together.
that third party in. Yeah, I love that. You
Yeah,
need
let's look
consent?
at this
I'm
together.
I'm consenting. Are you consenting?
Yeah, 100%. Let's look at this together. And I want to just walk me through your thinking about this. It's saying this because here's the thing that happens. A lot of times teens will be like, okay, but actually, right? When actually happens, the clause afterward is like, somebody else told me, or at so and so's house, or AI said, right? Walk me through what it said. And then let me tell you your thinking. And then you can have that conversation of like, okay, this is how this aligns with our values or how it doesn't align with our values.
Mhm.
Or here, I could see where it would be saying this, but actually, or maybe you don't hit them back with the actually, but you say, I'm wondering if we play this out a little bit, what might be happening down the line. And so you
Mhm.
use it as a teaching opportunity, but you find an opportunity to bring yourself into the content and do it as an experiment. I also recommend that psychotherapists and psychologists do this as well, right? When you have your team coming in for your sessions, you can sort of assume that they've engaged with AI at some point. That's what all of the data shows us.
Yeah.
And you could say, yeah, in those conversations that you're having with the AI, let's bring it in. I would love for us to see some of that content, or maybe like a snippet of it, or maybe even we do some of that in the session together so that we can start to pinpoint where it goes a little astray in terms of
Yeah.
a judgment call, and maybe some things that align closer to your values.
So, in order to do that, I'm trying to think about what parents need to have. Like I'm a techie person. I love technology, but I don't imagine that every parent is, right? A lot of parents are low tech, a lot of a lot of therapists, but there are people who are more on the low tech scale
A lot of
than
therapists are low
right.
tech.
Right. So you said that I didn't say that. Okay,
That's my bad job. I'm just keeping it real.
so what do we need to do as parents and therapists in order to make sure that we are informed and have the appropriate literacy to be able to help and challenge where appropriate?
Yeah. Well, in those scenarios where you're doing the experiments, your teen absolutely probably has a phone, right? That they're
Yeah.
using. And so that is an opportunity for them to be in the driver's seat around sharing that information with you. A lot of teens are protective of the phone 100%, and you're not trying to violate boundaries, right? So you're asking for, bring me into the loop of what you're hearing and what you're saying, what the conversation is. Absent that, I also think that there are so many organizations and groups that are doing really strong work right now to try to create summative resources. So, for example, the American Psychological Association has a storehouse of resources and information, advisories that are compiled. I know you and I had the opportunity to work together on one such advisory that really helped to walk, parents through from that perspective. There's also from the clinician perspective, there are other resources being compiled that do some of that really heavy legwork around evaluating the different certifications, evaluating the different kinds of research that supports different kinds of AI applications or solutions, and really kind of distills things down for folks so that they're not having to do the yeoman's labor of understanding everything from scratch. So I would say that the reputable resources like APA Labs, the American Academy of Pediatrics, they have a center of excellence on social media and youth mental health, but have also, because of the ways in which AI has become so predominant in our lives,
Yeah.
begun to include information and resources targeted specifically at parents, caregivers, and teachers to support teens and young people as well. So I would say those are some of the places where you can get some of that play by play. And maybe this is controversial, there
Yeah.
are psychologists like yourself, like me, who are taking to the interwebs, who are taking to Instagram, who are taking to TikTok, and who are trying to provide really bite sized information that's
Mhm.
anchored in the science, that's anchored in the evidence base that you can watch in the pickup line while you're waiting for your kid at soccer practice or
Yeah.
in the pediatrician's office to make sure that you're kind of getting a little bit more of that play by play and information.
Yeah, I love that. I love that plug, especially because I think a lot of the time now, just because of the way technology has moved along, we don't have a lot of attention span and time. And so micro learning opportunities are really very important and very key in terms of getting information out there in a sort of as needed, just in time sort of approach. So I love that aspect. So let me ask you. So if I am a parent and I'm hearing this and I'm beginning to freak out a little bit because
Mhm,
I know my kids using that the chat GPT or the Claude or the whatever. And I know that they don't always listen to me, but I want to start engaging with them and I want to start getting invited to the conversation, as you're saying.
mhm.
Where do I start? How do I start this?
I would think about this as like you do any other conversation that you have with your team. It will likely feel very awkward in the beginning. And I almost always, and you would, everybody use your own style. I almost always open up a conversation with a little bit of humor. And I will say something like, look, I'm about to climb Cringe Mountain right now asking you this, but tell me everything right now about AI. Like, I will even use it as like, you tell me what you've been doing. Can you bring me up to speed? Right? Sometimes teens like to demonstrate a little bit of mastery, right? And
Yeah.
showing you something. So whatever you can do to find that initial point of entry with your teenager. And I will oftentimes say, like, look, I don't actually know X or Y or Z, right? And so you're leveling a little bit, not like, oh, I'm coming in to give you wisdom from on high. I've got some real gems I need to drop to you, and now I'm going to have you have this conversation with me. So finding a way to sort of equalize things and be in conversation, but you also want to be in conversation and in dialogue about every aspect of the teen's life because the reality is technology, AI, digital media, social media is not separate from the teen's experience. It is interwoven. And so if you're having a conversation about what happened at soccer practice or lacrosse or that last, school dance that they went to, you can bet that there's going to be some element of a digital experience that's embedded within that conversation. And so listening for those opportunities is also part of it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that piece of advice is that recognizing that AI is integrated into a lot of things, right? And integrate a lot of things and in a lot of different aspects of their lives. They might be using their friends might be using it. They're using it at school nowadays. And so just being mindful of the fact that they're getting it from a lot of different places. And it's not just, if they have their phone or their tablet or whatever, there's a lot of different AI aspects and applications that we need to be mindful of. So the last question I want to ask you, right? Because I want
Yeah.
to be mindful of the two sides of the story, right? What do we
Yeah.
need to be careful about in terms of overcorrecting in a way that actually could be harmful to teens?
Okay, here's the thing. And this is a big controversial piece. I think there's a lot of polarization and we don't get into the nuance of this. So I'm really glad you've asked this question. I think that the idea of bans is really, really tricky territory. And I've seen this happen with social media. I think we're watching this unfold on a global stage right now, the response to social media. And I can bet that we're going to get into a place of copy and pasting that with AI at some point in time, pending all of this regulatory safeguards that need to take place. But I think the idea of bans is one that I can understand where people want to go there, but it is potentially incomplete and misguided because what ends up happening is these digitally native, digital minded teens will absolutely find a way. And banning does nothing to
Mhm.
actually improve or make safer the solutions that we're looking to regulate and that we're looking to get teens off of. So instead, we have to do the really painstaking work. And I would love for us to increase the pace, but we have to do that painstaking work of making the safeguards around the solution more robust instead of trending into ban territory. And I could absolutely see that would be something on the horizon for AI and teens.
Yeah, I mean, it's already here, right? There's a few states that are already banning it, and I was talking to a former guest, and one of the things we are talking about is one of the challenges when you ban something is it also prevents the research, right? How do we learn? How do we learn what works, what doesn't work, where the boundary should be if we can't even engage with it as the kids are doing? So then it leaves us out of the picture, but the kids are still doing it, as you said. They will find a way. So
Yeah.
I'm with you in
And
that camp.
we don't get the chance then, as you said, to then develop solutions that are grounded in the science because
Mhm.
there is a real role for technology to play in increasing access and really improving equity of access to high quality, not just like, oh, well, we couldn't get you in person, so we're going to give you this like thing instead that's not as good. But
Yeah.
really, I think we have to reformulate the way that we've been thinking about the care continuum, reformulate the way we've been thinking about models of care, and
Mhm.
technology has to show up there. But I think we lose public trust
Yeah.
when we start to, because technology is really, surging ahead. But as we do these sort of like, we're going to just pull the fail switch and say, no, we can't use it at all. And I think it ends up putting psychology way, way, way behind. So,
Yeah. That's a really valid point that you made, and I've been talking about this a lot, is we as psychologists need to start thinking differently about the way in
mhm,
which we've done things. Just because we used to do it that way doesn't mean that that's the only way or that's the way we need to do it in the future. AI is bringing to light a lot of advantages, a lot of risks, but also a lot of advantages, and we need to start thinking about, is that the only way to do that? Is that the best way to do that given what we have now and given the capabilities, you know? So I think definitely we need to start spending some time figuring out what are some of the different ways in which we can leverage this because the kids are, right? There's research that shows that some kids even prefer to use AI over human therapists, right? And so we need to start thinking about it. It's not just if you don't have a human, then use AI. Some kids prefer
right.
AI. So we need to start really thinking about what does that mean? What does that say about who they are, what they need that can make it helpful for them. So
Oh my gosh, I have to just tell you this one other thing you were asking about, like how do parents open up the conversation. You also my child, my 8-year-old daughter, she's like, "Why are you asking me that? Ask Siri." And Siri, right? So they are having these conversations of like, "Oh, Siri is going to give us the information that we need." And so that was a perfect moment for me to say, "Where do you think Siri gets all her information from?" And she was like, "Oh, our
right.
Siri is like a personified individual, not personified, but a feminine
Mhm.
voice. So she calls it a she. And she was like, "Oh, I don't know. She just has all the." I was like, "Oh, actually, Siri gets all this information from all the knowledge that's already existed that people put together, and then Siri is summarizing it for us." And she was like, "No, Siri is giving me my Apple Music song that I'm asking about." But these are the teachable moments of like, how do they think this is designed? And I think to your points of like that teens are using this in school. Teach me how you're using this to write your paper. Teach me how you're using this to summarize. And that then gives rise to these other
Yeah.
conversations where you can get into the meat of, I think, what people are trying to talk about with teens.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. This has been such a great conversation, Amber. I want to be respectful of your time and
Of
say so.
course.
How do people get a hold of you if they want to continue the conversation or get some advice from you? What's a good way of reaching out?
Okay. first thing is science has to be of service. And so I've been really working on getting science out of journal articles and into real people's lives in ways that make a real impact, which means that I am on TikTok and I am on Instagram at Dr. Amber Childs, where I put together summaries of information about AI parenting, as well as information for high achievers and high performers who are trying to live their life
Wow.
without burnout. You can also find me at dramberchilds.com. You can feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn at Amber W. Childs. And those are lots of good places to reach out, connect, and to see some of the work.
Awesome. And we'll make sure those are in the show notes. Amber, it's been such a
Perfect.
pleasure. I really appreciate you coming on. What's a last tip or recommendation that you can leave us with?
Curiosity is free. It's free and it is so expansive. It is the most precious thing that we have. And the good news about it is generalizable. You don't have to like wait until like future directions. It's generalizable across so many different domains and aspects of our lives.
Yeah.
I think it really helps us to center. And so I would say curiosity is the main currency of the day.
I love that. It applies so broadly. Curiosity with AI, curiosity with our kids. I mean, I think that's such a great approach. So thank you for that. That's really very helpful.
You're welcome. Thank you for
All right.
having me. This has been a total blast.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming on. And for everybody else, if you've enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave us a review. Feedback is a gift, and we love gifts. We hope you will join us again.